VCY America presents Crosstalk, a nationwide call-in program discussing issues that have an effect on our families, our communities, our churches, our nation, and our world. Crosstalk, an opportunity for you to voice your concerns for biblical principles. And now live by satellite and around the world on the internet at vcyamerica.org. Here is today's Crosstalk.
And a blessed Monday to you. Glad to have you with us on Crosstalk today. If you've been tuned in on the radio or television, you've been hearing a lot of talk about the fiscal cliff. Now, if you've done any hanging around cliffs and valleys and mountain climbing and stuff, the issue of cliffs always represents a hazard. Falling off the cliff, driving off the cliff, whatever. Now, this term, fiscal cliff, has been coined, and we are concerned, obviously, when we see what's happening economically in our country and what that cliff represents. Now, our guest today is Michael Connelly. He is a U.S. Army vet, a retired constitutional attorney, and the executive director of the United States Justice Foundation. And, Michael, it's a privilege to have you on the air with us today.
Well, thank you for having me with you.
We're having a little bit of, is this a cell phone today?
Yes.
Okay, if moving it about is breaking up a little bit, but if you can hold it real steady, we'll make it fine.
Okay.
At the forefront of most newscasts, we're hearing about this fiscal cliff thing. Can you define to our listeners, in plain, ordinary language, this fiscal cliff and exactly what are we facing?
Well, basically, we're facing a situation where there would be massive tax increases. All the Bush-era tax cuts would be reversed. Taxes would go up on everyone in the country who pays taxes. At the same time, there are going to be significant spending cuts in areas not where we need the spending cuts, but in areas where we can't afford the spending cuts. And I'm talking about national defense, cuts to our military programs, our veterans programs. All these are going to happen automatically unless Congress and the President do something between now and the end of the year. And it doesn't look like they're going to do it.
Now, the President claims that he has a mandate from the electorate to pursue raising taxes on the highest income earners in the country. Do you agree or disagree on that?
Well, he may think he has a mandate, but most people don't understand that the people he's talking about raising taxes on are not just billionaires or even millionaires. They are, for the most part, people who earn over $250,000. Those are mostly small business owners. They are the ones who create the jobs in this country. They are the ones who will be taxed to death. They will have to stop creating jobs. They will have to stop expanding their businesses. So that's an entirely different fiscal cliff, is throwing us into even worse unemployment than we're in right now. And that's what the President plans to do. I mean, the President of the United States does not want to keep us from going over this cliff. In fact, as far as I'm concerned, we went over it over a year ago when Congress caved in. We had a Republican-controlled House, but John Boehner and the Congress caved in to the President's demands on the debt ceiling. And they basically kicked everything else down the road. They gave him the right to increase the debt ceiling on his own volition for a while, and they created the so-called super committee. Now, the super committee was made up of 6 Republicans and 6 Democrats, 3 from each of the House representatives and the Senate. And it was supposed to reach an agreement to cut $1.5 trillion worth of spending over the next 10 years. If it didn't, the President demanded that there be automatic cuts, the so-called sequestration. Again, most of those cuts coming from the military. Number one, the whole concept of a super committee was unconstitutional. The Constitution of the United States provides for the American people to be represented by 2 senators from their state in the United States Senate and representatives from their districts in the House of Representatives. It doesn't say that those people can give up their right to vote on our behalf or give up the right to represent us. That's exactly what they did when they created the super committee. It should have been challenged by somebody in the House or Senate as being unconstitutional. I think it would have been a successful challenge, but nobody had the guts to do it.
Well, you know, I've been hearing about this super committees, and then we have the czars that have stepped in cabinet level issues that are appointed special. Job czars, you name it, all bypassing the true function of government.
Well, exactly, and I've said this from the beginning when the first czar was appointed. Somebody in the United States Senate needed to step in and file a lawsuit and say, look, the Constitution gives me the obligation, not just the right, but the obligation to vote on cabinet-level appointments made by the President of the United States. Mm-hmm. They're supposed to be approved by a majority of the Senate, unless the Senate says that, in specific areas they don't have to be approved, like minor appointments. These are major appointments. These are people who have been given extraordinary powers, been given budgets that are not under the control of the Congress, yet 45 of them have been appointed. No senator has ever stepped forward to take the action that needed to be taken. Instead, they just complained and whined. Again, this violates the Constitution of the United States, and it's something that Obama is doing on a daily basis, is bypassing the Congress, violating the Constitution, and that's one of the things U.S. Justice Foundation is here for. We're going to be getting more and more involved in constitutional challenges to the breach of the balance of power in the Constitution. When
a president is sworn into office, he swears to protect the Constitution. And we're seeing an abortion of the Constitution.
Well, exactly. Basically, the president takes the same oath of office I took as an Army officer, and that is to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. That's his oath of office. The same oath of office is taken essentially by every federal employee, by every state government employee, by every local government employee. I have written 2 articles in my blog over the last year and a half detailing areas where I think the president has committed impeachable offenses. Most of them wind around the fact that he continually violates his oath of office. He not only does not protect and defend the Constitution, he's actively trying to destroy the Constitution, and that's very scary.
Right after the election, everybody some heard the first remarks from House Speaker John Boehner. Now, everybody was excited because the gavel went into John Boehner's hand. But John Boehner seemed to capitulate to the president, saying, okay, Mr. President, lead us. Does Mr. Boehner remember the mandate that the House was given?
Apparently he does not, because, as I said, they caved in. They gave the president basically everything he wanted about a little over a year ago when they created the super committee, and they kicked the can down the road as far as dealing with the spending cuts and that sort of thing. And they're being told to do the same thing again. Only this time they've got their backs into a corner. The problem, one part of the problem is that I think Boehner and other Republican leaders thought for sure that Obama was going to be voted out of office this year. They thought they were going to take control of the Senate, and they would not have to deal with this problem by fighting the Democrats. Instead, that didn't happen. So now they're in a catch-22 situation because Obama basically holds all the cards. If the Republicans vote against the increase of the continuation of the tax cuts for the middle class, they're going to be blamed, even though Obama is the one that's going to force that to happen. So the Republicans don't know what to do at this point, and they're running around like proverbial headless chickens, but they put themselves in this position by not standing up to the president, like you said, right after the Republicans took control of the House. That's when Boehner and they should have drawn the line in the sand at that point. They didn't, and now the chickens are coming home to roost.
Well, this man had a big-sounding, powerful voice and even some rumblings of authority, but all of a sudden we see these things crumble. Now, over the past weekend, John Boehner said that he was flabbergasted with Tim Geithner when he told him about the White House plan to keep us from going over the fiscal cliff. Now, I've got a clip here from Fox News Sunday, and I'm going to air this thing. And listen, here it is. I think it speaks on its own. Listen carefully.
How would you characterize the deal that Treasury Secretary Geithner offered you on behalf of the president this week?
A non-serious proposal. The president is asking for $1.6 trillion worth of new revenue over 10 years, twice as much as he's been asking for in public. He had stimulus spending in here that exceeded the amount of new cuts that he was willing to consider. It was not a serious offer.
Wait, you're saying that there is more spending than spending cuts?
That is correct. They outlined they'd be willing to talk about $400 billion worth of cuts over 10 years. But at the end of the year, they wanted to extend unemployment benefits. They wanted a new stimulus program for infrastructure. They wanted to extend some other tax breaks. And all of this new stimulus spending would literally be more than the spending cuts that he was willing to put on the table. Now, understand, Chris, the day after the election, I saw the results. I went to the cameras and made it clear the Republicans were willing to put revenue on the table if there were serious spending cuts and reforms put in place. We've talked about it. The President and the White House have had 3 weeks, and this is the best we've got.
Take us behind the scenes. Take us inside the room. What was the mood music when Tim Geithner sits there, like we are here, and presented this to you? What'd you say?
I was just flabbergasted. I looked at him and said, "You can't be serious." I've just never seen anything like it. You know, we've got 7 weeks between Election Day and the end of the year. And 3 of those weeks have been wasted with this nonsense.
Okay, so if they're wasted, where are we now? And quite frankly, what are the chances we're going to end up going over the cliff?
Well, right now, I would say we're nowhere. Period. We're nowhere.
Sounds exciting. Now, what do we know about the White House plan?
Well, basically, what John Boehner said is true. I mean, it is not a serious plan. If for Obama it's serious, because basically it would cave in and give Obama everything he wants. It will give him the increase in taxes on the upper-level income people and small business owners. It will give him the opportunity to do another stimulus package, even though the ones he's done in the past have been abject failures. But what he wants the stimulus money for is to pay off the union bosses and pay off the companies that donated big bucks for his reelection campaign. That's what he used the money for the first time. He wants to do that again, even if the companies are about to go bankrupt. So that's part of the plan. And then the so-called cuts he's going to offer, they're not even really offering anything specific. They're just saying that down the road we'll talk about $400 billion worth of cuts, maybe. So there is no offer on the table from the president, and the reason there is no legitimate offer is because he wants this to happen. He doesn't care about the middle-class tax cuts because here's the situation there. If he does get them, the reversed, if he does get the middle-class tax cuts going ahead and extended, he's going to claim a victory over the Republicans. He's going to say, I got it done. But it's not going to make any difference really to him because of the fact that the increases in taxes that the American people are facing over the next 2 years under Obamacare and under new regulations that are going to be put on the energy industry and that sort of thing, all of that is going to take care of those tax cuts. It's going to wipe them out. So he's looking at getting that money anyway. He's also looking at taking control of the 401k plans in this country, basically taking away people's pensions, private pensions, and saying, we're going to federalize these, and we're going to, but I'll talk about more about that in a minute.
You betcha. We'll take a break, 60 seconds, and be right back with you. Our guest today is Michael Connelly, a U.S. Army vet, a retired constitutional attorney, and the executive director of the United States Justice Foundation. We'll be right back. Don't go away.
Back to Genesis with Dr. John Morris, scientist with the Institute for Creation Research. Dr. Morris, are there any dinosaurs alive today?
No, Chris, probably not. However, there have been some unconfirmed rumors of dinosaur-like beasts found in rainforests around the world. There's a bigger likelihood that in the huge ocean are some of the giant dinosaur-like reptiles called plesiosaurs. Even though we have literally hundreds of reports of sea dragons, we just don't know for sure. Similarly, there's a possibility that giant flying reptiles like the pterodactyls are still alive, but these are also unconfirmed. In all likelihood, the dinosaurs and their giant reptile cousins are fully extinct, but they were all created in the creation period mentioned in Genesis chapter 1. Mostly died in the flood, but have gone extinct since the flood. That's what the Bible indicates back in Genesis.
For more on Genesis, visit our website at icr.org. This is Chris O'Brien. Thanks for going back to Genesis.
And welcome back to Crosstalk, where we're talking about the fiscal cliff, which has been bandied about quite a bit, almost like a threat coming from the White House. I'm not sure who coined the term, but it certainly has gotten the mileage. You hear the people talking about it. Now, of course, we just heard moments ago a clip with John Boehner claiming he was flabbergasted when Tim Geithner told him about the White House plan to keep us from going over the cliff. I imagine it'd be like having a picket fence to keep cars from going over a cliff. This elements of seriousness certainly are in question. Now, we're understanding that the White House is also mandating that Congress no longer be able to vote on the debt ceiling. Is this true?
Yeah, that's something else that Obama wants. He wants to force Congress to just give him the power unilaterally to raise the debt ceiling anytime he wants to. And that would, be disastrous. Of course, Congress is letting him do it anyway. But the problem is we are now approaching $17 trillion in debt. We have increased our debt. We've over doubled our national debt in the last 12 years. No nation that has ever done something like that in the past has been able to survive. But then we have a situation where I'm not sure Obama wants us to survive. I think he wants to bring this nation down. The problem here is not capitalism, which is what the liberals and so-called progressives keep claiming, and Obama keeps claiming. The problem is that we have drifted more and more into a socialist economy over the years, and Obama's running us faster, like a runaway train, into a socialist economy. And everywhere the socialist economy has been tried, everywhere the socialist form of government has been tried, it has been a failure. That's why Europe is on the verge of collapse right now, because of their socialism, yet here we are heading right down the same path.
I heard some rumblings about I think it was Pravda that had made a statement, some article written that claims that the United States is now fast becoming a communist nation. Whether you agree with that or not, it's very alarming when you have a country that has seen communism at its worst, and then you see this same sense of mentality here afflicting our country. Now, Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell said that he burst into laughter when Geithner outlined the proposal. And the question is, anybody in the House or Senate taking this seriously? And I'm going to ask you why. Because we have the House. I mean, we have control of the House as conservatives at this point. When I say we, I mean conservatives or so-called people with a conservative mindset. But is there any commonality of spirit, any agreement, or is it simply a bunch of bureaucrats on one side of the political aisle or the other?
Well, no, there's no agreement at all. In fact, there's not even agreement among Republicans. Unfortunately for the Republicans, the Democrats continue in the House and the Senate are marching in lockstep.
Yeah.
And you talk about communism, and what Pravda said, I think, is very true. If anybody should know about communism, they would, because they were formed under the Communist Party regime, the old Soviet Union. What you have with communism or socialism or Nazism is you basically have a dictator at the top, and then you have a Congress or a Reichstag or whatever you want to call it, parliament underneath that does whatever the dictator says. Well, here in this country, we have the Democratic Party. I mean, when was the last time you saw a Democratic senator vote against something that Obama really wanted? The only exception has been they have all voted against his budget proposals over the last couple of years, but they've had no budget of their own, even though they're required by law to pass a budget every year. But for the most part, the senators vote for whatever he wants. The people in the House do basically the same thing. So we have no diversity there. You have a Democratic Party that's going to do whatever Obama wants them to do, and they will take this country over the fiscal cliff. They will take us into ruin. They don't care, because that's the ultimate goal, to bring this country to its knees. And then, see, at that point, Obama will start nationalizing. And again, this is something the communists and socialists have done. It's something that Adolf Hitler did as a Nazi, taking control over the essential elements of government and the essential elements of using that government control to take over the essential elements of the private economy. and of individual liberties. Most people do not realize it, but when Adolf Hitler was elected Chancellor of Germany, and again, he was elected. He didn't take control by a revolution. He was elected Chancellor of Germany. The first thing he did was to take control of the national health care system, feeling that if he took control of health care, then he could control the people. The second thing he did was to disarm the population, taking away the private ownership of weapons. Obama is about to sign the Small Arms Treaty with the UN to do the same thing. The third thing Hitler did, was to start cutting the military, to replace the people in the military, the German military, who were loyal to the country and not loyal to him, to replace them the people that were loyal to him. Obama is about to use sequestration to decimate our military. You see the pattern we're following here.
Certainly do. Now, House Majority Leader Eric Cantor said that the House Republicans will not increase tax rates for the American people. Do you have confidence that the House Speaker Boehner will toe the conservative line?
No, I'm afraid I don't have confidence in that. Like I said to begin with, they've put themselves in a catch-22, so that if they vote not to increase tax rates on anybody, and by doing so vote against the president's proposal, then the middle-class taxing cuts will expire, and everybody will see their taxes go up. If they vote to let the tax rates go up on the higher income people and vote to continue to allow the tax cuts for the middle class, then they violated what they told us they were going to do, and that's not to increase taxes on anybody. So whichever way they go in this case, unless they vote not to allow any tax increases and somehow force this into a real standoff with Obama, which I don't think they're willing to do at this point, whatever they do is going to be lost. It's going to be they're going to anger their base, they're going to anger the population in general, because people are going to see their taxes go up on the middle class. But like I say, that's going to happen anyway. Even if the tax cuts are continued, the taxes that are built into Obamacare and other things that Obama has passed and other things he's doing by executive order, which, by the way, is totally unconstitutional, our taxes are going to skyrocket over the next couple of years in all areas. And half the time we're not even going to realize what's happening.
You know, the White House keeps warning us about the fiscal cliff. Yet last week it was reported that the Obamas will be vacationing in Hawaii for Christmas at a cost of at least $4 million to taxpayers. And the question, how do we reconcile this planned trip while the nation is in a financial crisis? Now, whenever there's been a critical moment, for instance, we've had a hurricane and the victims are there, the president will immediately make a token visit and express his condolences or whatever. Or when serious attacks have occurred, they'll make this token thing. You'd think that with this crisis and people struggling, and some of them in New York still don't have power back, and the miserable life that they're living because of this, and the president takes off on a $4 million vacation paid for by your tax dollars, folks. How do you reconcile this with the nation in financial crisis? What do you think there, Michael?
Well, you can't reconcile it, but he doesn't care. Because let me tell you what we're dealing with. Nancy Pelosi was the same way. Nancy Pelosi had to have her own private jet by the Air Force when she was Speaker of the House, even though prior to that time, most of your speakers of the House and members of Congress flew commercially. But Nancy had to have her own. They had to be outfitted with a massive bar, and she would use it to fly her friends and family between Washington and San Francisco. Nancy Pelosi, Barack Obama, Michelle Obama, Tim Geithner, a lot of other people in Washington, D.C., Harry Reid, are what I call elitists. They are the people, and they are just like their counterparts, because it was the elitists that ran the Communist Soviet Union. The Communist Party members had all the perks. They had the big homes. They had all the travel. They had the vacation homes on the Black Sea. The same was true of Adolf Hitler and his minions in Germany. The same has been true of every dictator out there. They are the elitists. They look at the rest of us as the unwashed masses. We are too stupid to know how to spend our own money. We are too stupid to know what is right for us. We are certainly not smart enough to be able to rationally use freedom of speech and freedom of the press and that sort of thing. So they look at us as being, we're not citizens to Barack Obama or to Harry Reid or to Nancy Pelosi. We're not free citizens of the United States. We are supposed to be their subjects. They are supposed to be the elite. And as such, they feel like they're entitled to perks like $4 million vacations to Hawaii. They feel like they're entitled to this because of the fact that they are so far superior morally, intellectually, in every regard. They're so far superior to us. And that is what has been used by every dictatorship throughout history. And we have fallen into the trap of that, and we are allowing ourselves to be entrapped. When we play this game of taking from the people who earn the money and giving it to the people who don't earn it, don't want to earn it, then we are falling into the same trap that every dictatorship has had throughout history. Regardless of what ism, whether it's communism, Nazism, socialism, it doesn't matter. This is why Obama does this sort of thing. This is why the Geithners and the Pelosi's and the Reids, that's how they look at us.
Folks, our guest today is Michael Connelly. He's a U.S. Army vet, a retired constitutional attorney, and the executive director of United States Justice Foundation. Michael, give us points of contact where people can get your information.
Well, about the United States Justice Foundation, go to usjf.net, and you can read all about it and what we do and how we represent people and fights over the Constitution to protect constitutional rights. I have my own blog and my own talk radio show on the Constitution. You can access the blog at www.michaelconnelly, CONNELLY.jigsy, JIGSY.com. And you can read my blog, and you can get my email address, and you can contact me, and I'll send you notices when I post a new article. You can also find the access to my radio show, which is broadcast at Central Standard Time, live on Wednesdays at 3 o'clock. And it's all on the Constitution. This is what I deal with. And by the way, in the last couple of weeks, I have now reactivated my law license, so I'm no longer a retired attorney. I'm going to be handling cases, get personally involved in cases for the U.S. Justice Foundation.
Fantastic.
Again, you can find it at usjf.net.
Okay, and you've got that usjf.net.
Right.
usjf.net. Folks, access this site. Your future depends on what you're hearing today and what's going on. Now, when I think of The Hill is a publication, and it reported that Brent Bozell, who's been a guest on this show, is a conservative activist and a fundraiser, that he is threatening to steer donors away from the Republican Party if the GOP lawmakers sign a deal to raise taxes. Do you believe that this is a legitimate threat?
Oh, I believe it is, because there are a lot of people out there that feel very strongly, and particularly your people that are Tea Party oriented. I mean, they went all out in the elections in 2010 to elect people to Congress that believed in the Constitution, and now they're feeling betrayed. And so I think this is a legitimate threat. I think it will take place. We'll
be back in a minute. This is Crosstalk on the VCY America Radio Network. Stay with us.
It's not easy to find a quiet place today. Those with children and those in the business world know the busy demands. And in today's technology, we're hearing phones buzzing, email reminders chiming, and text messages chirping. The hectic nature of life gets more intense, where multitasking becomes a 24/7 task. Sadly, it is often spending time with God each day that gets crowded out from busy schedules. To help you regain your focus, VCY is offering a new daily devotional by Nancy Lee DeMoss. It's called The Quiet Place, providing a daily devotional reading for each day of the year. It is the hope of Nancy DeMoss that these readings will stimulate your appetite to dig deeper into God's Word. In a flexible, leather-like binding, these devotionals combine Bible study with practical applications. Copies of The Quiet Place are available for a donation of $20 to VCY America by calling 1-800-729-9829. It's a handy resource for yourself or to share with others. Call 1-800-729-9829.
And we're very glad to have with us today Michael Connelly, a U.S. Army vet and not a retired constitutional attorney anymore. He just mentioned he's reactivated his license, and he's going after some of these issues. And we're very grateful to have watchdogs, people like this who are watching over the issues of constitutionality in our government. And the question is, we send people to Congress to do this. We send representatives and people who have a phone number, by the way, folks. And many times we will sit here and wring our hands and weep like a toad in a hailstorm, wondering exactly what's going on, but literally do not take the steps necessary to let our voice be heard. And I want to give you a phone number today, which you've heard me give many times before, but I want you to put it on a sticker and put it on your refrigerator. And you see, today we're on 92 radio stations. And if 100 people listening to each station would pick up that number and call and deal with this business of the fiscal cliff and share your thoughts, do you realize that you'd have about 9,000 phone calls would end up in Washington before the sun sets? I'm serious. Now, there are going to be many of you that just sit and do nothing. And it's time for people who care. Who was it that said all we need for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing? Well, I think we're seeing an example of it. And folks, some of you are complaining because of leadership that's now been reelected. And some of you people sat home on your laurels and never bothered to go and vote at all. In other areas, we found that precincts, miraculously, counting the votes, there was only one party represented, not one opposing vote in the total precinct. In fact, in some precincts, there were 108 to 110% votes cast. More people than live in the precinct were voting. Now, does this not raise some questions that I had the phones ringing in Washington? And then you find that the organizations who guard our voting privileges are sound asleep or half-equipped or totally out of commission, don't know what to do, and there's no enforcement. It makes you downright frustrated, doesn't it? Well, it's time that America wakes up and smells the coffee. And that's why we're here, to talk about these issues, because there are things you can do. And I'm going to give you a phone number. And again, the phone number that you can call and let your assembly, that's in the House of Representatives, which is supposedly run by conservatives. But if you want to call, and that was Brent Bozell reported that a conservative activist, or he is a conservative activist, and that he is going to steer donors away from the Republican Party if they don't deal in this issue to raise taxes. Now, what action can we take? You can call and share your views. That's 202-224-3121. Now, don't shrug your shoulders and say, well, I'll write it down some other time. You'll forget, and in 5 minutes, you'll forget it. Here it is, area code 202, that's Washington, 224-3121. And if that's busy, 225-3121. That's the Capitol switchboard. You see, but I don't know who my representatives are. I don't know them by name, or I'm totally politically ignorant. Just tell them where you live. When the switchboard answers, I live in Podunk, Missouri, or I live in Ohio, or wherever you live, tell them the town. And I'd like to speak to the representative that represents my area, or the senators. And you can pick up the phone and call and let your voice be heard. And when you do, demand a written response. Demand that they write you a response to your question. Let them know you're concerned enough to become an organizer in your community, and let them know that you care and that you want a response. Too many people are sitting back and say, well, I just don't want to make waves. I just don't want to make people uncomfortable, or I just don't want to get in trouble for calling our congressman. In trouble? Folks, where in the world are you? Wake up and smell the coffee. The Titanic is going down, and you're out there polishing the handrails. And it's time for people to wake up and man the lifeboats. And maybe I seem like I'm over dramatic here, Michael, but that's just the way I feel.
But you're not being overdramatic at all. People do not understand how serious this situation is and where we are headed. And let me briefly say something about the Constitution per se. Mm-hmm. The Constitution was designed to provide a limited government. Article 1 and its sections deal with the Congress and the limitations on Congress. For example, Article 1, Section 8 says what the Congress can do. Controlling health care is not in there. The Congress did it anyway. And then they gave the power to do most everything to the executive branch. The executive branch, the president, is limited under the Constitution to enforcing the laws made by Congress. He can't choose which laws, but Obama does that all the time. He won't, for example, defend the Defense of Marriage Act. He won't support the enforce the immigration laws. He does not have the power to make the laws, yet he does that and continues to bypass Congress. The Bill of Rights of the Constitution does not contain a list of rights given to us by the government. It contains a list of rights that are inalienable, that belong to us and cannot be taken away by the government. Yet we have members of Congress, including Dick Durbin of Illinois, talking about putting limitations on freedom of speech. They want to take away our Second Amendment rights under the Constitution, even though the Supreme Court has said twice now that the right to keep and bear arms is an individual right. I've written a booklet about this. It's called Our Constitution, and I've taken every article, every section, and every amendment of the Constitution, put them in exactly the way they were originally written, and then made my comments about this, about what they really mean. And if people want to order that, they can go to the usjf.net site and find out about it. They can also go to my personal blog at www.michaelconnelly.jigsy.com, or they can find out how to order multiple copies at www.constitution.jigsy.com. We recently had an order of 5,000 come in. We had an order of 500 come in from a group in South Texas that distributed it to 6 school districts. People need to know what they're losing, and that's what I'm afraid that people don't realize is if they don't know what's in the Constitution, how are they going to know when their rights are being taken away?
I want you to give that website again, and the at J, was it J something?
Jigsy, Jigsy.
Jigsy, because that goes by real quick here. Jigsy.
It's Michael Connelly, at Jigsy.com, and then the Constitutional Law Alliance. It's actually just Constitution at Jigsy.com, or .jigsy.com, I should say, not at. www.michaelconnelly.jigsy.com, www.constitution.jigsy.com, or just usjf.net.
Now, folks, we're going to open our phone lines. If you are concerned about what's going on, you had better speak up. And the lines are open right now at 800-733-9829. Are you just sitting wringing your hands and letting the steamroller come down and crush your house? You know, I remember back in the days when the big pro-life issues were going on in central United States. I was down in Wichita, and I watched as coming down the freeway were combines and tractors and implements with big banners and signs, and said that the heartland of America is pro-life. And they came driving into Wichita because the people rose up and said, and I remember standing outside of Mr. Tiller's clinic as there were thousands of people gathered there speaking their piece. My question, in the olden days, I mean, the Boston Tea Party was over just a small tax on tea, and they turned Boston Harbor into iced tea. But the question today, is there enough guts in our country? Is there enough intestinal fortitude for people to stand up? Good grief. In those years, people would come with their muskets and their pitchforks marching to an issue. And we still talk about having a well-regulated militia, which is all storytelling. I don't think that exists, and I'm not advocating battle in the streets. But where are we, people? We have fallen asleep like the proverbial frog, and that's been put in the cold water, and then the burner starts heating the water up, and the frog gets cooked to death. Where are we? Our telephones are jammed right here. People calling from all over the country, and we're going to go right now to Howard in Rochester, Minnesota. And Howard, you're on the air with Michael Connelly.
Good morning, sir. My question is this. I believe, I'm a firm believer that Barack Obama is an evil man. At first, during his first term, I disagreed with him, but now I've come to the conclusion that he's an evil, evil man. I want to know how in the world liberal Democrats could possibly think that they could confiscate, that they would be able to confiscate and seize individual retirement accounts and 401ks from the American people and literally not have a rebellion on their hands. I just can't fathom that they are that far gone. Am I wrong?
No, unfortunately, you're right, but they are in a position where they think they have the power. And this is one of the things that is being bandied about in Washington, and that is seizing our 401k accounts and not saying, oh, you're not going to get your money. What they're going to do is they're going to give us IOUs on the federal government. So instead of us having money in an account with a broker or a bank or with an insurance company, we will have money supposedly the federal government will pay us. Again, so they've created another entitlement here by doing this. They get all of this money away from people, and they create another entitlement, and that just puts more and more of us in a position where we rely on the federal government for survival. That's what it's all about. That's what your liberals want. That's what Obama wants. They want to control the American people. They want us to have to rely on the government to survive and therefore keep voting for the same people over and over into office. This is what they're talking about with the 401k accounts, the IRAs. They're serious about this. It's not a matter of thinking there's going to be a rebellion. They don't care. They don't think the American people have guts enough to go out and really take matters into their own hands if necessary. One thing that I keep pointing out when I make speeches, the one thing they're forgetting about is there are 21 million veterans in this country, military veterans, and a lot of us are really upset right now.
Thank you, Howard, from Rochester, Minnesota. We're going to go to, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and talk with Fred. Our telephone number, 800-733-9829. Fred, you're on the air.
Yes, the guest is a practicing attorney.
Sir, you're talking to him. You can talk to him.
Okay, is it too soon to start impeachment proceedings against Barack Obama for lying under oath for 2013? And if you can't, other attorneys that you know might, Jay Sekulow and Liberty Counsel and so on, to put together something?
Well, we basically already have something, but the trouble is attorneys can't initiate impeachment. Even the prosecutors in this country cannot initiate impeachment. The only way it can be initiated is through Congress, and this is the way it's set up in the Constitution. First, a majority of the members of the House of Representatives have to vote for impeachment, to impeach the president or any other federal official. Right now, we have a majority in the House, but they haven't seemed willing to show the guts to do this. If the House passes the impeachment bill, then it requires a trial to be held, an actual trial with the Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court presiding, and both sides presenting evidence and this sort of thing, and an actual trial will be held, and then the Senate has to vote by two-thirds majority to impeach the president and remove him. That's what has to happen.
We'll be right back in 60 seconds. This is Crosstalk on the VCY America Radio Network. Don't go away.
For the Worldview Weekend Minute, I'm Brandon House. Our website is worldviewweekend.com. I know that there are many people today that struggle with fear and anxiety and worry and depression. And as we've learned in our last few commentaries, God does not desire for us to live that way. In fact, Proverbs 12:25 says that anxiety causes depression. Worry brings anxiety. We see that in Luke chapter 12, verses 22 to 32, and in Philippians 4:19. Wrong priorities also bring despair. And a spirit of fear does not come from God. We know that. And we know that God takes care of the righteous. May I ask you today, are you living a righteous life? Are you living a life rightfully in obedience to God's word? Anxiety also calls into question God's power, his provision, his priority, meaning you and I. He loves us, he cares for us, he gave his life for us, and his providence, his divine guidance. Stop the sin of worrying today and get into God's word.
And welcome back to Crosstalk as we're talking about the approaching fiscal cliff. And does America really care about this stuff? I mean, are there people that are willing to pick up their phone and let their voice be heard in Washington? I mean, it's as close as your telephone. The call 202-224-3121 or 202-225-3121. Call your congressman. You say, well, I don't know who he is. Fine. Just tell him who you are. And say, I live in whatever town you live in, and I want to talk to my congressman's office. And I want you to take my message and get it to the congressman. I am asking for a response. When you say I'm asking for a response, there is an obligation there to respond in writing. Too often times you have even rookie congressmen that come in who are being taught by other mentors who are part of the system. You know, your freshmen coming in there, Michael, and they're hesitant to take any steps in their first terms.
Yeah, unfortunately they are. But, you know, we've reached a point in this country where they can no longer wait. They have to start making a move. They have to start protecting the American people, protecting the Constitution. I was at a luncheon earlier today. There's a group I belong to that has some very, very high-power people in there, very knowledgeable people. I'm talking about people who are economists, psychiatrists, people very high in their field, all who are conservatives. And we had one of them today named Jim Johnson who has written a book that will be published soon about the fracture zone, as they call it. And this guy knows what he's talking about. He's done this with other people involved in economics. And we have reached a fracture zone in this country where the vitality of our free market system is under attack. And we're going to crumble, and we're going to collapse. And it's going to happen within a year or maybe a little bit more. But it's going to happen unless something is done. And people don't realize that. People have to understand that this country is being brought to its knees. It's being brought to its knees deliberately, because Obama figures if he can destroy the free market economy, bring our economy down, then people will say, okay, we'll let you be dictator for life. We'll let you take control of all of our industries and control of our IRAs and our 401ks, and we will rely on the government to take care of us. That's what's happened in every dictatorship in the history of the world. And that's what we're facing.
And, folks, this messianic syndrome, and I'm not talking about the true Messiah here, but the idea that political leaders become messiahs is dangerous stuff. And we're talking about that. Let's get back to our phones very quickly because the time is flying by like crazy here. Mauston, Wisconsin, we're going to talk to Mason. And, Mason, you're on the air with our guest.
Hello. I just wanted to bring to your attention that people need to stop talking about raising the taxes on our upper 2%. There is no such thing as any business. I don't care if it's small, medium, or large business. Businesses do not pay taxes. They never pay taxes. Consumers pay taxes. When you raise the cost of something in running a business, you have to have a profit margin. So what you do is, like in the instance I gave you, a candy bar in the last 3 years has gone down about half its size, and it's gone from 59 cents to $1.29. Or you lose the number of people that work for you, or you make them part-time. These things are what happen in business, but the consumer always pays for the cost of the taxes going up. It isn't big business. They have to have a profit margin.
Your response, Michael?
Well, I think that's absolutely correct. The problem we have in this country is that eventually small businesses or any type of business, if they have to keep raising their cost because of the taxes being increased on them, then the consumers are eventually going to get to the point where they can't afford to buy the product, or they don't want to buy the product because it costs so much. At that point, those businesses start going out of business. And when they do, people lose their jobs. Or the businesses decide we have to cut back on jobs in order to keep from raising our prices. But, yeah, it's a trickle-down effect. And, Mason, you're absolutely correct. That's what happens in this country, and that's what people don't realize is happening. When they talk about that putting taxes on corporations or businesses, they're talking about taxing the American people. When they put taxes on the cost of fuel or the cost of electricity, All of those come down to us, to the American people. So the government is taxing us in so many different ways, and people just don't realize how bad it is.
Okay, very quickly, on the road in Wisconsin is Ty. Ty, you're on the air with our guest.
Yes, I totally agree with this notion that he wants to be a dictator, a Muslim Marxist dictator. So I want to take a different question. What is the likelihood of states like Texas and others seceding from a union and then gathering border states and starting a new United States of America under the Constitution? Because we've got a lot of freeloaders that aren't going to give up Obama.
Okay, well, as far as succession goes, and I'm getting a lot of questions about this because I am a constitutional attorney, I personally believe that succession is allowed under the Constitution. Now, in 1869, the Supreme Court of the United States said, no, it's not. And they have a ruling to that effect, which at this point is the law of the land. That doesn't mean it couldn't be overturned. Doesn't mean, for example, it could be ignored by the states. I think the states could secede. I'm not advocating that at this point because of the fact that it would create all kinds of problems for people in the states. For example, I live in the state of Texas. Texas, yes, we are in a remarkable position. We have our ports, we have our own oil and gas industry, we have large cities, we have military bases, all of this. But we would still have enormous problems if we try to seal our border, we try to keep people out, because right now everybody's leaving California and moving to Texas. And so succession would cause a lot of problems. It's a last resort. But I think it is legal under the Constitution.
We have about 45 seconds left, Michael, and I want to give you that again to give out your address to how people can reach you, okay?
You get usjf.net to find out about the U.S. Justice Foundation, www.michaelconnelly.jigsy.com to find out about my blog and my talk radio show and how to order copies of my booklet on the Constitution.
Michael, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us, and I hope many of you will access that website and make yourself aware. And folks, by all means, learn how to pick up your phone and call Washington. I'll tell you, maybe the phone call, if 9,000 phone calls went in today, maybe the congressman would listen. Thanks for joining us on Crosstalk.
Listening to Crosstalk via satellite and the internet from VCY America. Views expressed may or may not be those of this station. For a CD of today's program, send a donation of $6 or more to VCY Tape Ministry, 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53208, or download by RSS or podcast from crosstalkamerica.com. And join us again for Crosstalk.